Today's story isn't just a legend, it's a confession. It was told to us by a man who had kept silent for many years. But one day, by a campfire in the cold wilderness of Montana, he finally began to speak. He said, "If you knew what I know, you would never buy old houses."
Chapter 1. I know how this sounds. An old man sitting by the fire, mumbling about cursed houses and voices in the basement. But I swear on everything holy, I'm not making any of this up. Believe me, I would gladly forget if I could. Every night for 30 years I've tried to erase these memories, but they've burned into my mind like acid into metal. When we moved into that house, I had just turned 11. Mom, an elementary school teacher, had quit due to health issues. Doctors talked about stress and chronic fatigue. But I saw how she would wake up in cold sweats, whispering the names of her dead students. Dad had died in a car accident 3 years earlier, and Mom married Leo Kerensky, an old college friend. Leo worked as a realtor in the small town of Whitefish, but in recent months he barely left his apartment. Neighbors complained about strange sounds at night, like someone moving furniture or scratching claws against walls. When Mom asked about it, he would just smile and say he had found the place of our dreams. His eyes had developed a feverish gleam that I mistook for ordinary excitement. The house was selling for a price that seemed suspiciously low, even for a small town. The listing read, "Historic property with rich character, needs caring hands." Local residents avoided the place. Some would simply turn away when they heard the address on Elm Street, 1347. The clerk at the hardware store even crossed himself when Mom mentioned the purchase. She just laughed, saying it was because of rural superstitions. From the outside, the house looked like a postcard from the past century. Victorian architecture with high peaked roofs, paint faded to a ghostly turquoise shade, elegant wrought iron balconies completely overgrown with wild vines. The air inside was heavy, saturated with the smell of dampness and something else, something sweet, like in old museums or crypts. But Mom walked through the rooms with shining eyes, stroking the cracked walls and repeating, "Our new life begins here." The first few days I explored the overgrown garden. Strange bugs crawled everywhere, large black ones with metallic gleaming shells. They swarmed especially thickly around an old well in the far corner of the property. The well was sealed shut with thick boards nailed down with rusty spikes the size of fingers. Between the boards, darkness peered through, and sometimes cold air rose from below, smelling of swamp and decay. When I tried to peer through the cracks, Leo burst out of the house like a scolded cat and hit my hand with such force that I fell. His face was twisted with rage, completely unlike him. "You can't go there," he growled in a voice that seemed alien to me. "Never approach the well. Do you understand?" His gaze at that moment was not his. His pupils had contracted to pinheads, and in their depths something hungry and ancient flickered. Chapter 2. First Signs. A week later, the screaming began. Not at night, which would have been somewhat explainable, but in broad daylight. Mom and Leo fought about things I didn't understand. She said he had fundamentally changed, that this wasn't the man she had married. He replied that she was interfering with the process and that Soon everything would fall into place. One afternoon, I heard Mom sobbing in the bathroom. The door was ajar, and I saw her sitting on the cold tile floor. Ice-cold water was flowing from the faucet, though she hadn't turned it on. And on the mirror covered with condensation, clear handprints of children were visible, small ones. Much smaller than mine. I began to notice oddities. Every morning, my toys would be somewhere other than where I had left them the night before. My toy soldiers would line up in neat rows, all facing the same direction, toward my bed. Books would be turned to pages I hadn't read. Clothes in my room began to smell of something foreign. Wet earth and old metal. At night, I heard breathing in the closet. Quiet, irregular, like a child with asthma. When I gathered the courage to open the doors, there were only my clothes, but the air inside was freezing even on hot summer nights. Once I woke up to the sensation of someone gently stroking my hair. The touch was so real that I almost smiled, thinking Mom had come to wish me good night. But when I turned around, the bed was empty. Only a strange coldness hung in the air. And on the pillow next to my head remained the imprint of a small hand. Chapter 3: Descent into the Basement. The real nightmare began a month after we moved in. Leo began to look sickly. He lost weight, his skin took on an unhealthy gray tint, and under his nails was constantly some black dirt that he couldn't wash off. He would stand for long periods at the window, staring at the well, muttering something under his breath. One rainy evening, he took my hand and led me to the basement door. His palm was ice-cold and damp like a corpse's. "I want to show you something," he said in a voice that held not a drop of warmth. "Something every resident of this house should know." I got scared and tried to break free, but his grip was iron. He smiled, but his eyes remained empty, as if no one was behind them. His nails, black and split, dug into my wrist. We descended creaky wooden steps into pitch darkness. We had no flashlight, but Leo walked confidently, as if he knew every inch of the way. The basement reeked of mold, dampness, and something sour, like vinegar mixed with rotting meat. Stopping in the middle of the basement, Leo turned on an old light bulb hanging from a wire. Dim yellow light illuminated stone walls covered with strange symbols scratched by a sharp object. On the floor, a circle was drawn in chalk, and inside it, a pentagram. In the corners lay burnt candles and what looked like small animal bones. "It all began here," Leo whispered, and his voice echoed off the walls. "Here they lived before us, the Kerner family. There were 6 of them, parents and 4 children, but only one remained, the youngest son, Timmy, and now he lives in me." His eyes flashed in the semi-darkness with some inhuman light. I screamed, hit him in the stomach with my elbow, and ran upstairs, stumbling over the steps. Behind me, I heard his laughter, childish, ringing, completely unlike an adult man's voice. I reached my room, slammed the door, and pushed the dresser against it. My heart was pounding so hard it seemed like it would burst from my chest. I called for Mom, but there was no answer. The house was dead silent. When I finally gathered the courage to leave my room, I found Mom in her bedroom. She was sitting in the corner on the floor, staring at the wall with an unblinking gaze. And on the wallpaper, right at her eye level, a word was scratched. "Stay." The letters were uneven, childish, as if written by a child who had barely learned to hold a pencil. Chapter 4: Winter Isolation. Winter covered us like a heavy blanket. Snow rose almost to the first-floor windowsills, turning the house into a white fortress. We were cut off from the world. Roads were snowed in, the phone line was down, and the nearest neighbors lived several kilometers away. The isolation got on everyone's nerves. Mom read the same old magazines and barely spoke. Leo spent hours at the window watching the well, which was now hidden under a snowcap. At night, he would get up, go into the hallway, and freeze there for 20 to 30 minutes, just staring into emptiness. One particularly cold night, I woke up to a strange noise downstairs. It sounded like someone was dragging heavy sandbags across the floor. I got out of bed and tiptoed down to look. Everything was in its place, except in the kitchen I found an open window, and beneath it on the linoleum, a puddle of water, though it was 20 degrees below zero outside. When I was closing the window, I noticed fingerprints on the glass. 3 fingers, like a hand with the pinky and ring finger cut off. And these prints were from inside the house. The next morning, the whole world was shrouded in thick fog. It didn't lift even by noon, creating the feeling that we were trapped in a milky white capsule. Even the electric light seemed dim and sickly. I suggested trying to get to town, but Mom shook her head. "He wakes up when we're silent too long," she said quietly, looking somewhere through the wall. "Who wakes up?" I asked. She didn't answer, just hugged herself tighter. Chapter 5: The Disappearance. 2 days after the fog began, Leo vanished. In the morning, he drank his coffee as usual, then said he was going out to the backyard to check something. We never saw him again. Mom and I searched the entire property. Leo's tracks ended at the well, where the snow was strangely melted, forming a perfect circle of black earth. The boards that covered the well had been moved apart, as if someone had pushed them from inside. I lay on my stomach and peered into the black hole. I shouted, "Leo!" The echo went down and disappeared without finding bottom. Not a sound in response. Only cold air rose from below, carrying the smell of rotting leaves and something else, metallic and sweet. That night, Mom locked all the doors in the house and even put chairs under the handles. We sat in the hallway by candlelight. The electricity had gone out since evening. She put her trembling hand on my shoulder and whispered, "If he knocks on the door, don't open it, even if he speaks in my voice or yours. Promise me." I promised, but the words stuck in my throat from fear. Chapter 6: The Return. Leo returned after 3 days, not as a living person, as a shadow of the past. In the evening, I heard the back door creak. I looked out into the hallway and froze in horror. Leo stood in the doorway. His face and hair were wet, as if he had just climbed out of ice water. His clothes hung in dirty rags, his boots squelched. But the most terrifying thing was his eyes, empty, glassy, like a doll's. He looked in my direction, but seemed to see something completely different. "I'm cold," he said in a voice without intonation. "There's no time there. There's only waiting. But now I know where you are." Mom locked him in a room on the first floor that we had previously used as a storage room. He didn't resist, just sat on the floor and began scratching something with his nails on the old boards. We brought him food, but the plates remained untouched. For 3 days we kept him locked up, and on the 4th morning, he was gone. The room was empty, the lock unbroken. Only the window was open, and on the windowsill were dirty tracks, not human, but animal-like, with long claws. Chapter 7: The Forbidden Room. After Leo's second disappearance, I began to notice things in the house that had previously escaped attention. On the 2nd floor, directly across from my bedroom, was a room that no one ever talked about. The door was always locked, and the handle was ice cold even on warm days. Mom explained that the lock had rusted and the key was lost, but sometimes passing by, I would smell dampness and mold seeping from under the door, and at night sounds came from there, as if someone was quietly rearranging furniture or scratching walls. One evening, when Mom was sleeping soundly, and she now slept only with sleeping pills, I gathered the courage to investigate the mysterious room. I took a kitchen knife and began picking at the keyhole. The metal gave way surprisingly easily, as if it didn't want to resist. Click, and the door slowly opened. Inside reigned almost complete darkness. The windows were boarded up tight and heavy curtains hung like funeral shrouds. The air was thick, saturated with the smell of decay and something else. Childish, sweet, like milk that had stood in the sun too long. In the center of the room stood an antique rocking chair that slowly swayed back and forth, though no one was nearby. On the floor lay a Ouija board with alphabet and numbers, and next to it, a planchette frozen on the word "here." The walls were covered with children's drawings made with chalk directly on the wallpaper, simple stick figures, houses, trees, but all the people in the drawings were faceless, and instead of windows in the houses were black holes, and everywhere prints of small palms reaching upward toward the ceiling. In the corner lay a crumpled mattress, and on it, a child's drawing in colored pencils. A family of 6 people stood in front of a house, but one of them, the smallest, was not next to the others, but underground, reaching out to those on the surface. At the bottom, in childish handwriting, was written, "The Kerner family, together forever." This name was familiar to me. The next day I went to the town library and found an old newspaper clipping from 1987, "Mysterious Disappearance of the Kerner Family." The article said that a family of 6 had vanished from the house on Elm Street without a trace. Neighbors first thought they had simply moved away, but all their belongings remained in place, and the car was in the garage. The only thing they found a week later was their dog in the yard, dead, with its tongue torn out. Chapter 8: The Last Night. From the moment I opened the forbidden room, everything in the house changed. Mom began calling me by the name Timmy, the name of the youngest Kerner child. At night, I heard her talking to her reflection in the mirror, and the reflection answered in a child's voice. I could no longer sleep. Every night, moans, crying, and scratching came from the walls. Sometimes it seemed the whole house was breathing, and the walls would expand and contract like the lungs of a giant creature. I began keeping a diary, recording everything that happened. But every morning the pages were blank, and only one repeating text appeared in the notebook, written in childish handwriting. "He's inside. Don't trust memory. We're waiting." On the last night, Mom woke me with a quiet whisper. She stood next to the bed in a white nightgown, but her face was not hers. Too young, with big childish eyes. "We have to go there," she said in a voice that echoed with another higher voice. "I hear them calling, I hear him calling." I understood she was leading me to the well. We walked through the snow-covered garden. The fog was so thick that the flashlight illuminated only the first 2 steps, but Mom moved confidently as if she knew the way by heart. At the well, the boards were again moved apart, and warm air rose from the black hole, smelling of earth and childhood. Mom approached the very edge, looked down, and spoke quietly. "I remember you. I remember your voices in the walls. Forgive us for disturbing your peace." Then she turned to me and smiled a sad adult smile. "Forgive me, son, but some houses choose their own tenants," and jumped into the well. I screamed, tried to grab her, but was too late. No sound, no splash, only endless darkness swallowed her, as if there was no bottom at all. Epilogue. I don't remember how I got back to the house. I only remember that in the morning, looking in the mirror, I saw no reflection of myself. Instead, in the glass was a child's room with a rocking chair and a drawing on the wall, where a small figure under the house reached out to those who remained on the surface, and that figure was me. The rescue service found me 3 days later. I was sitting in the forbidden room in the rocking chair, drawing something with chalk on the walls. They said I was in shock and delirious about voices in the walls. Officially, Mom and Leo were declared missing persons. The well was examined, but it was empty. They didn't even find a bottom, as if it was just a hole to nowhere. The house was sold at auction, and I was sent to live with my aunt in another state. 30 years have passed. The house at 1347 Elm Street is for sale again. New photos, new price, new listing. Historic property, full of character, awaiting caring hands. No one remembers the Kerner family. No one remembers us. But if you, who are reading this story, ever hear someone calling your name in a house where you've never been, don't answer. Because some places don't let go of their tenants. And the house still remembers me. Sometimes, on particularly quiet nights, I hear Mom's voice calling me home. But I know it's not her calling, it's the house calling. Final pause by the campfire. The old man fell silent, staring at the dying embers. The wind howled in the treetops, and someone thought they heard children's voices in that howl, calling someone by name. And somewhere in Montana at 1347 Elm Street, lights come on in the windows of the old house.